Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode 101 of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm not the guest, I'm the host, David Chambers. I'm never a guest on my own podcast, of course, until someone interviews me on my podcast, which will be interesting. But yeah, today is a wonderful episode. Actually, it's a bit different from say last week's around conscious relationship and some of the other stuff I do around relationship, dating, and sex. This is really about food, the food we put on ourselves, right? And particularly around kind of plant-based diets, or often known as veganism. Getting enough protein, and also is some interesting conversation here around masculinity and protein, masculinity and meat, and masculinity and veganism and plant-based eating, and how men are often very adverse to giving up meat, and how I think there's quite a relationship between how we view men and their consumption of meat and what that means about a man, actually. And I get in with my guest, Jeffrey Boadi, and we really get into some of that and how it's shaped us and how it shapes the people that we interact with. And it's interesting, I see this more and more, how, not just with food, this is generally even in coaching, is that when I meet women who want to come to me for coaching and talk to me, they're super open to taking on board and learning and being wrong, or not doing the right thing and so forth, whereas men, we're very, very tied to getting things right, and looking a certain way and not being seen to be getting things wrong or avoiding ridicule. And it's very interesting how, as men, we're very fast to ridicule our friends for doing something different, for moving outside of the box. And that's no different with eating and food and so forth. So in this episode with Jeffrey, we really get into a lot around protein, how we can get plenty of protein. We really bust the myth around, if I go on a plant-based diet, I won't be able to get enough protein if I go to the gym and so forth. And we really do bust that as something that's completely untrue, completely made up by probably the meat industry and Piers Morgan, to be honest, and tabloids, newspapers who are probably supported by the same people that own all the cows and so forth in the fields. But yeah, we really bust that, and he really takes you through multiple food types, things that you can eat that would easily give you the equivalent of protein in comparison to like a steak or a piece of chicken and so forth. So we really get into that. We talk about why people are afraid to go to a plant-based diet. Some of the cultural reasons, like especially, myself and my family are Jamaican. So moving, I grew up in a very meat-heavy world. So moving away from that and how that affects. We talk a little about what we call meat is masculinity, and like the influence of toxic masculinity on meat eating or stopping eating meat and so forth. And we touch a little bit about varying your vegetable intake, actually. Even if you're not on a vegan diet, the importance of varying the vegetables that you're taking in, because actually it's incredibly important. And, we talk about some kind of vegan processed foods and fiber and stuff like that. It's a wonderful episode by, just talking about the importance of what we eat, because I just see more and more as we grow in our awareness and our consciousness of who we are and how who we are affects other people and affects the rest of the world, which is, if you're listening to this podcast, is most likely one of the journeys you're on, is this deepening and expanding of your awareness of yourself and your impact on the world and other people, be that emotional, mental, physical, or spiritual. We have to start to look at food, because food is also part of what we put into our bodies, but we also consume it. So it's something we take from the outside world. So it's important for us to look at, how is the food I'm eating affecting me physically, mentally, emotionally? And how is the food I consume affecting the world around me as well? So this is kind of part of how I fit this into, the podcast for me, because I just think it's such an important part. And I see for myself, when I'm eating really well, good healthy diet full of vegetables and good food, I feel energetic, I feel more present, I feel more able to be with my loved ones. I feel like I'm better at coaching, all round. So I see how food is such a important part of how we live our lives, and how we show up as people, and it's a deep part of our identity, especially as men. Like I said, we talk a lot about how meat is masculinity and so forth. So if you're interested in Jeffrey's work, all the details are in the show notes. You can find him on Instagram. He does some amazing recipes and so forth there, which I talk about at the end. So get involved in his content, because I really enjoy watching his videos. And I actually bought his ebook, which is fantastic as well. Highly recommend that. And the other thing I'd say is that if you're interested, I have a workshop coming up with also, we talked about it last week on the last podcast episode about conscious relationships. And we've got a workshop, explaining to people how to get into a conscious relationship, how to build one, how to create one. And that's on the 12th of December at 5 p.m. UK time. And that's probably one of the ones you're really interested in. But the details in the show notes, you can find it there, or you can find me on Instagram, at @theauthenticman_ if you want to know more about that. But I'm going to stop. I'm going to let you get into learning all these incredibly important things about plant-based foods. I've just listened to it. It's an amazing episode. I hope you enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, got something a little bit different for you today, a little bit culinary. Because, I like to mix it up, but I also see that what we eat and what we put in our bodies has a huge effect on how we live and how we exist and how we are as beings in this world. And the guest I have with me today is someone who I just came across him on Instagram, cooking up storms. When I say cooking up storms, it's just like the food was so vibrant, it felt like I wanted to lick my screen, right? It's amazing, I saw it. And he talks a lot about, plant-based eating and veganism and so forth. And my guest today is Jeffrey Boadi.
Oh, dear. Thanks so much for having me. And obviously, really looking forward to talking about all things plant-based food and things like that. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah. I've just been looking through your Instagram and just enjoying the colors. I think is the thing that really stands out, like the vivid greens, the yellows, the reds, the layers. Like it really jumps out the screen.
Yeah. I mean, I always talk about getting as many colors onto your plate, getting as many antioxidants into your diet, all the different colors, red, purple, blue, they all carry different kind of benefits. So and it just looks good. It thankfully it's attracted people, and it's it's part of the reason why we're here today. So it's good that really nice to hear that you've been seeing some good things on the Instagram.
Yeah, and it kind of goes against the old ideas about men and cooking as well.
Yeah, that's true actually. Because I guess as I said, I was, as we just mentioned previously before we came on, I was never really much of a cook. Like it was never really something that I had much of an interest in. It was always the kind of standard gym diet: you grilled chicken, your sweet potato, with not much culinary kind of technique involved. So shifting plant-based, obviously knowing to do it in the best way, I've realized I had to dive straight into it, and I kind of just fell in love with the process and really just enjoy kind of sharing that with other people as well. So it's been good.
Wow. So I guess that, leads me on to the question I ask all my guests is like, how did you come to do the work that you do today?
So it all came about in 2017, around about sort of coming up to the end of the summer in August. I guess I was kind of slowly moving into a place in my life where I was open to like new discovery and new things. I kind of shifted away from, trying to play professional football. I just met my now wife. So things were kind of starting to shift in my life. And prior to that, I was very much in the whole, meat is masculinity camp, sport, all that kind of stuff, meat for protein, training in the gym. I need 500 grams of protein a day or whatever it is that we kind of associate with training. And I came across a documentary, which I'm sure you may have heard of, called What the Health on Netflix.
Yeah.
Now, I do caveat this because I do say making changes, like radical changes to your diet off the basis of a documentary probably isn't advice for everyone. But for me, I just felt really compelled to I watched it and then I watched it again with my wife, who's my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, well, we just need to just go vegan. Like this is it. I was just kind of exposed to all of this information about how diet influences disease. And of course, documentaries, they can be biased, and they are biased. They're trying to get across a specific kind of viewpoint. But for me, it really just sent me down a rabbit hole of looking at everything from a health perspective. The diet that I had before was very much geared to what I thought was best for performance and health and training and that kind of stuff. And I still wanted to continue doing that. But I was like, right now I've got to do it with plant-based food. So that's what took me on the journey of reading the scientific papers, doing the reading, listening to podcasts, watching videos, just kind of really immersing myself into the knowledge of it, and just kind of learning as I went along. So the food that you see now on my Instagram is definitely nowhere near to what it was kind of like 3-4 years ago, where I was almost like throwing things together and not really sure of what I was kind of doing. But I was always geared towards health, performance, longevity, and trying to be the healthiest version of myself, as I wanted to kind of get that across. And then I can maybe 18 months to 2 years further down the line, I kind of started to share it on Instagram and kind of show the meals that I was creating, sharing the learning that I was doing, creating like some infographics and, food videos and that kind of stuff, and just providing a platform for a bit of education. And yeah, I think I really kind of just fell in love with the process. And it's interesting because I would say that I'm quite introverted, but when it comes to this, like, I'm so passionate about it. Like, I just come alive and I really want to share the information and share the recipes with everyone else. So yeah, that's kind of how I've come about into this process and into what I've been doing on Instagram, and obviously with my website as well, my ebook, which I released in February earlier this year. So yeah, just really enjoying the process of kind of providing that teaching and even doing, continuing to learn myself.
Wow. And it's amazing how, like you said, you have these documentaries and they are getting a message across, but equally they can be quite inspirational, you watched it, I remember watching What the Health, and was like, holy shit. Like, this is, I've been eating, I think I always remember, it's like, I've been eating so much chicken in my life, right? Staple part of diet is like, my mum every Sunday for literally all of my childhood, rice and peas and chicken was like every single Sunday.
Exactly the same. I growing up in a Ghanaian household. It was like, it was unheard of to not have a meal without meat or any kind of animal product. So at breakfast, it was like 3-4 eggs. Lunch, it was fish. Dinner, it was chicken. Constant, like so much chicken. Like now I think back to it, it was amazing how much meat I actually ate. It was like so much. And that's why it was almost so shocking, because I was just doing what I thought was right, I guess. And I guess, of course, influenced by tradition, culture, society, what your parents feed you, and you kind of just almost grow up thinking that your food choices are yours, when in fact they're often shaped by the external forces that are around you. So I think someone else might watch What the Health and maybe they might become kind of conscious of their health, but maybe not go all the way plant-based, which is still a good way to eat if you're doing it properly and you're still getting plant diversity in there. But for me, I just really felt compelled to just chop all the meat together overnight. So yeah, it's been 4 years and I haven't eaten any meat at all. And I don't miss it either. I think a lot of the meals that I've created, I've kind of really found a process for myself which worked in terms of really enjoying every single piece of food that I eat.
Oh, well, 4 years, no meat at all. It's incredible. Yeah. To go like overnight change, that's like straight cut line in the sand.
Yeah, complete line in the sand. I remember the last meal that I ate, my wife made this like prawn meal. It was really nice actually, but that was the last supper, as they say. And that was it. And then the next day it was literally just like, right, now I've got to figure out how to do this properly. And it kind of snowballed into where I am today.
I imagine your wife got on board easily, or was there some?
Yeah, she did, to be honest, because I think at the time, just before I'd met her, she'd had some health problems that she'd kind of been dealing with, and it kind of almost like tied in and made sense a little bit. She's not vegan at the moment. I'd say she probably eats maybe 85-90% plant-based, but as I'm sure we'll touch on further in the conversation, like, you don't actually necessarily have to be 100% vegan to eat healthy.
Mm.
It's not like a black or white thing. And a lot of people, you know, as we just discussed before we came on, when we talk about veganism being quite a heavy loaded term, is because there is a lot of absolutism where it's like, you need to go vegan or I'm never going to speak to you again, or you have to eat, you know, plants because meat causes like cancer. And it's just like there's so many factors that really go into it. So I think you can eat a diet that's 85-90% plants and still be very, very healthy. If you're sleeping right, you're, you know, training every day, getting good sunlight, there's so many factors that go into health.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess as you touched on it there, the word vegan carries so much charge.
Yeah.
There was a girl I used to be friends with actually. And when I
Mm.
first met her, I never forget, I said, oh, we were going out for dinner. And I
Yeah.
said, oh, I was like, have you any particular thing about eating? She goes, oh, I don't eat dairy, I don't eat fish, and I don't eat meat.
Mm.
And in my head, I was like, okay, yeah, cool. I just minus that from all food.
Yeah.
And then I remember thinking, as I was cooking, I think I was cooking, and I thought, oh wait, she's vegan, but she
Mm.
didn't put it in those words,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had the conversation about it. I was like, why did you never just say you were vegan? She was like, because veganism, when you say to people, there's so much charge to it
Yeah.
that we've been kind of conditioned to. The idea of the kind of not angry vegan, I'm thinking of the preachy vegan, you know, telling everyone at the dinner table. And I think it's really interesting that we have this. It's like, and I'm interested to hear, like, what do you think? Why does the word vegan or veganism have such a heavy charge for so many of us?
I think you've touched on it there. I think it's like, it always goes back to, you know, loads of people have come across someone who is vegan, who is very pushy with it. And it's actually really interesting because at the very, very outset of when I shifted my diet, I was not like super preachy, but I always wanted to speak and tell people, look, this is what I found out. This is what you can do. And I often find that that's the wrong way to go about it. Just, I think, being an example and just showing what you eat and not saying, oh, you know, meat's bad, don't eat this, don't eat that, which is kind of how I operate on my social media platforms, where I just talk about how, you know, the benefits of eating plant-based food and then let people make the decisions for themselves. I know I have a lot of people who are in my community who aren't necessarily vegan. That's actually okay. You know, I don't necessarily want to create an echo chamber where it's just veganism. And of course, I speak about the benefits of eating whole plant-based foods. And that's really my main kind of modus operandi, so to speak. But yeah, it really is just, you know, everyone's come across a vegan who's kind of criticized people and saying you're a murderer, you murder animals and all this kind of stuff. And whilst I get where they're coming from, people have to also understand that everyone arrives at their own pace when it comes down to kind of consciousness and an awakening of the awareness of certain things. Just because someone is now awake to what happens in the animal agriculture industry doesn't mean you can now say that to every single person and they're going to wake up right away. You know, we're talking about years of conditioning of habits that have to be unraveled. And for a lot of people, it can take a lot of time. You know, there's cognitive biases, there's, you know, kind of ignorance where you don't want to kind of be, you know, averse to what's going on with regards to the truth. And for most people, it is often more comfortable to stay in your bubble of what you already know, as opposed to being exposed to new information, and then which maybe might kind of change your perspective on certain things and maybe force you to change your habits. So I completely get that. And it's very interesting because maybe about 4 or 5 years before I actually went vegan, it was mentioned to me. And at the time, my reaction was, there's no way I could do this. Where am I going to get my protein? No. I just completely like shut it down. And I think that's just we have to accept that not everyone's going to accept things for what they are, essentially. It takes time. And I'm not going to sit around and bash people who aren't plant-based or who aren't vegan, because that's not a useful position to take. I want to just get the information across, do it in a way which is, you know, build a community vibe, do it in a way which is kind of not preachy. And I think that for me, that's been the best way to kind of educate and provide that inspiration to people.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like that. It's not being preachy. It's like, this is information. Do with it as you choose. You know, I'm helping you here. And it's interesting to say about the preachy vegan, because I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, have I met a preachy vegan in my life? Right. I worked for a company called Farm Drop in London. There was a lot of vegans there, and all the food was vegan, and there was no one that was. I don't think I've ever met a preachy vegan. I'm trying to think. I remember I traveled for a couple of years through Southeast Asia and India and South America, and met a lot of vegans as well.
Mm.
But I've never met a preachy vegan. I've only ever heard of the archetype of the preachy vegan, right? And I wonder if this archetype carries more weight than anything in actual reality.
That's true. I think that's actually a very good point. I've met a couple. There are a fair number of them online, but I'm sure you can find pockets of, little silos of any kind of characteristic of individual online. But that's actually a very good point, because I think I guess the prevalence of the kind of the stereotype of it probably does outweigh the actual reality, even though the reality is still there and kind of does exist. But I do think, as you say, like as your friend made a good point, it's quite interesting that she kind of spoke about, I don't eat dairy, meat, or fish. She could have just been like, oh, I'm vegan, but there's certain things that people may be averse to it or whatever. But it is what it is. It's really interesting kind of phenomenon. And I personally tend to just say I adopt a plant-based lifestyle. And then however people take it is however they take it, really.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost, when you do say it, and I've seen this with other things, like I went on a meditation retreat, and when you said awareness, I think it was interesting. It kind of triggered. I went on a Vipassana 10-day silent meditation retreat a few years ago, and one of the real big messages that came up for me was, you don't need to eat meat. You don't need to eat this much meat. And I came back, and for 6 months I didn't touch meat at all. I didn't have any alcohol, didn't have any meat for 6 months. How did I find it? Yeah, it was beautiful. Like I enjoyed, like I quite happy to cook. I think I bought a few more recipe books and started to, just to cook more, right? When you can create the time to do that.
Yeah.
And I think I only ate meat. It was Christmas Day at my mum's house, and it's like big dinner. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to choose before I go that I'm going to do. And then I made that choice of like, okay, I'm going to eat meat then. But for the most part, I've just reduced probably like 80% of the meat that I eat. I've reduced it down. And what I started to see was interesting. I'd go out for dinner with friends, and I'd say, they'd be like, oh, where are we going to eat? And I'd say, we're going to a steak restaurant. I'd be like, okay, I'm not that keen on a steak restaurant. Can we go somewhere else? And they'd be like, why? I was like, I'm not eating meat. I'm not. And I would put it as, I'm not eating meat at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would be like, why? Why are you not eating meat? What, like, and it's, people take it almost as an attack. Yeah. A personal attack on the way of living.
Yeah. Because I think what that comes down to is, I think a lot of people who decide, well, the vast majority of people who decide to move away from meat, is because they've seen something which has forced them to change their mind, whether it's the health benefits of reducing your meat consumption, or the animal agriculture side of things, and in terms of the ethical side of how animals are treated, or whether it's the environment. And if we've got 7.7 billion people to feed, shifting to a more plant-based diet will free up more land and all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of people who have that kind of response are probably aware of the presence of people shifting towards more plant-based diets, but they don't want that to come into their immediate reality, because it's then going to force them to actually, or if he's doing it and I'm associated with this person, should I now be changing? Am I doing something wrong? So that instead of thinking about that and internalizing it, they kind of push it out as almost an attack, where it's like, why are you doing that? But when it's like, but in reality, it should just be, a conversation. Like, oh, why are you doing that? And then you give your reasons, and they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And it doesn't have to be anything more than that. It doesn't have to be this kind of vegan, non-vegan, fight, and where people go into their different silos. I find that that's just not a very useful position to have. So, as I said, it all comes down to the fact that I think a lot of people are aware of the benefits of reducing meat consumption. As I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely cutting it out. I mean, there is, tons of evidence for that in terms of from a health perspective. Also, we don't know for sure which is better, a plant-based diet with some meat in it or not, but there is evidence to show that eating more plants is very, very beneficial for health in terms of this, chronic disease reduction, inflammation, all these types of things. So yeah, it's interesting, and I'm sure that over the years, people will start to, I would hope, become more receptive to at least hearing the information and hearing people's reasons as to why they're shifting.
I definitely see a big shift towards more conscious living on multiple levels, right?
Yeah.
Like from how we deal with each other, how we deal with our pasts. There's a lot of what I do in my coaching is like healing, but also what we're really looking at is the impact we have as a human being on people, but also the environment. And it's like where we start to think, oh, wait a minute, me eating this steak here, this is an animal. This animal was kept somewhere probably quite cruelly. it took up a lot of land, it took up a lot of CO2, it's also producing this and that. And we start to think, wow, this is the impact of what I'm doing. And I guess it's just a part of a more conscious way in which we're all trying to live and interact with each other. So we start looking at our food, but also looking at how that food affects our bodies as well.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, and that's what, you know, a huge reason as to why people are kind of starting to shift away. It's really becoming conscious of, hang on a sec, where is this food coming from? Is this food going to nourish my body? Is this food going to give me the nutrients that I need to energize me? You know, was anything harmed? And of course, you know, even being 100% plant-based, you're not living a perfect life. There are still, you know, when crops get planted, you know, insects die, certain animals die. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I live a perfect lifestyle by any stretch of the imagination, but at least I'm, I guess, more conscious, and especially from a health perspective, what are the foods that are going into my body that are going to provide me the best opportunity to live the longest, healthiest life that I possibly can live.
Definitely. It's all about living life as like a best quality that we can in the time that we've got here.
Exactly. Simple as that.
And you touched upon something earlier. I also thinking about this. You said the words "meat is masculinity." You know, you were in that camp, and I found from my experience that I'm far more likely to meet women who are vegan, right? Far more likely to meet women who are vegan.
Yeah.
The pushback I've got from people more than anyone has been men a lot of the time. And I wonder what your idea of why is it that men can be so vehemently against veganism?
You know, I think when I think back to when I kind of rejected it, the thought of, like, because again, my vision was so narrow in terms of, right, I only thought you could get protein from animal products. That was it. It was meat. And again, of course, you know, if we think about advertising, marketing over the years, sport, and all these types of things kind of factored into my kind of sole belief that if I need protein, I have to eat meat. So when it was mentioned to me at the time, I think I was maybe in Austria or somewhere like that, trying to find a professional football club. Maybe a bit before that, actually, it was mentioned to me, and I just couldn't understand it. I was just like, there's no way, this isn't possible. How is this possible? You know, I literally said, I'm going to waste away. So I think we have to understand that the marketing and the kind of the belief of that, the fact that you, as a man, to build muscle and to be strong, you need to eat meat, is so prevalent in society. And I just think that if you feel you have to prove your masculinity by how you eat, or by kind of how you have to, like, keep saying it, I think that's probably the least masculine thing that you can do. Do you know what I mean? I tend to believe that if you're a man of substance, your actions or your presence will speak for itself. You don't need to start going, oh, I need to eat meat, or, oh, I'm alpha, and all this nonsense. Like that's just irrelevant. So I think what it comes down to is that there's the piece where I think men are kind of worried about what other men are going to think of them as well. When it comes, if as you mentioned there, like when you told your friend that you weren't eating meat, a lot of people would be kind of interested in not doing it, but would be worried about what their friends are going to say. Like they're kind of worried about being the topic of ridicule, essentially. And this is it just comes down to just being true to who you are. Then it doesn't matter. Like, you can coexist with different people who have different diets and have different habits, different thoughts, beliefs, and whatnot. You don't necessarily have to always feel you have to align with what society accepts at the end of the day. So, and of course, I'm sure we're going to come on to protein, but there is so much protein in plants. Like, I can easily get 200 grams of protein on a plant-based diet very easily. But again, without that information, without that knowledge, I wouldn't have thought I could do that. So that time when I was told about the whole plant-based diet thing, I was like, no, how am I going to get my protein? I'm going to waste away, because I only thought fish, chicken, beef, eggs were the only way for me to get protein. But now I look back at it, and when you open yourself up to new information, you've got black beans, kidney beans, navy beans, tempeh, tofu, seitan, hemp seeds. Like, there's like lentils, so many places you can get protein from. It is ridiculous. And it almost kind of makes a mockery of the belief that, I think, which it's coming down now anyway. I do think that maybe it was a lot more prevalent in years gone by, but it's still there, and it still lurks in society, where a lot of men believe that they have to eat meat to be a man, which is just absolutely ridiculous, because your gender or how you're perceived in society not really got anything to do with what you eat. So yeah.
It kind of ties into like fragile masculinity, this
Yeah.
idea if you are, I have to be, if I am a man, I have to be, and you know, it says all sorts of things like, you know, I do a lot around, you know, emotional expression, connection, dating, relationships, love, sexuality. And it's always these things around men always pop up. It's just like, you know, to be a real man, you have to be alpha. And then it's like, there's a list of all these things that you have to be.
I don't even know what that means. We have to be alpha. What does that even mean? It's just such a nonsense. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But yeah.
And it is, it's this idea that all these things you do, it's things you do as well. It's not traits most of the time. It's stuff you do mean that you're a man, right? So eating meat is seen as like a man because it's like almost animalistic. I think that's one of the things we look at. It's like, you know, there's, you know, some people say, there's nothing more manly than, you know, hunting and then killing something and then eating it, right? Which you don't understand, for some people that's true. But actually, as you said, if you are a man and you believe you are a man, right? No action would make you less of a man because you are a man.
Exactly. This is exactly it. And it's not about your actions. It really is about your character. You can still exhibit characteristics of strength, integrity, you know, protecting your family. And that can be separate from what you eat, like the action of what you eat. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't, it's one of those things that I almost feel like you have to pull certain men away from the herd to then have the conversation away from people who they feel can influence them, because a lot of men, once they're in that group and they're around their, you know, friends, and they've got those alpha juices flowing when they're around 7 or 8 people, you get them by themselves and you have a conversation with them, probably a very different story. So yeah, it's the same with the whole plant-based thing. And I think, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure there might have been a few people who were looking at thinking, Jeff's, you know, he's gone a bit weird, he's gone vegan and whatnot. But for me, I just thought, this is my conviction. This is what I'm gonna, you know, this is my passion. This is what I'm going to learn about. This is what I'm going to express. This is what I'm going to, you know, kind of embody within myself. And I'm going to teach others and show others, you know, just how they can optimize their health in that same way. And I don't think that makes me any less of a man. So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It is this, and as you said, it's this this group idea, and a lot of it's around shame, you know, and embarrassment. We don't want to experience. We've all experienced some sort of shame, embarrassment in groups of men. And we want to do the best we can to avoid that because we don't want to relive those experiences. And I guess with food, because it's so tied to, it's something we do so often, you know, we eat multiple times a day. And then to be ridiculed for just eating some food would just feel, you know, and I've been there, I've had people ridicule me for eating food. Like, oh, what are you eating that? It's just like a plate of leaves. And you're like, okay, yeah, cool. Like, this is really offensive to you, you know.
Yeah, I genuinely feel like you just, and I think it's something that I've managed to develop over the years. You just have to have that conviction in what you believe in. You know, going when you're in, like, for example, office environments, work and whatnot, and I take my food in there, I know I'm going to get, like, people are going to be looking at thinking, oh, this is weird because it's not normal. But I'm actually right with that. Like, I'm actually okay with, like, not doing, you know, you're not kind of following the status quo, if that makes sense. Like, if I've got a conviction and what I believe in is true, it doesn't matter if 50,000 people don't think it's truth. Me, and within my own heart, if I have that belief that what I'm doing is impactful, is progressive, is benefiting me, and has a potential to benefit others, I'm going to do it regardless of what other people think.
Because it's your truth. It's what you believe.
That's it. Exactly. Simple as that.
Yeah. And that's something that we, in all aspects of our life, is just so true. It's like living by your own truths, right? What you believe is right, what you believe is just and good for the world, over taking on the ideas of others. Yeah,
exactly that. And I think that's where, you know, I speak to people in the community all the time on Instagram. Like, I really enjoy, like, connecting with people and speaking to them, and they always talk about, you know, a lot of guys talk about, oh, you know, I've started going plant-based and inspiring, like, my brother and this and that. And I think I almost feel like, especially with men, it almost takes that kind of someone else to embody something for them to almost feel like they now have permission to do the same thing.
Definitely.
Because, as you mentioned before, the overwhelming, you're more likely to find females women who are vegan. Like, the overwhelming majority of people in my community, I think it's maybe 3/4 women and maybe 1/4 men in my Instagram community. So I'm definitely wanting to, understand why that is. Why are so many men maybe not so kind of in tune with, and not just plant-based nutrition and veganism, maybe just overall health? Because I don't just speak about plant-based nutrition, I speak about overall health. And I think there's a school of thought amongst men that health is just smashing the heaviest weights in the gym, and it doesn't really go much further beyond that, and eating as much meat as possible. But from my perspective, I want to live a long, healthy life. So yes, I lift very heavy weights in the gym, but I also try and adopt other kind of practices for my health, whether it's cold showers, whether it's kind of, I don't know, breathing exercises, which I maybe do, every so often, reading books, trying to kind of expand my knowledge. Like, I think health and well-being is it's a spectrum, and I'm just trying to find all areas and kind of touch all bases, really.
It's like a holistic
Exactly.
approach to life, from experience as well.
Yeah, exactly that.
I love that. It's something I really empathize with, and like I try to act through, is like not just looking at ourselves as like these siloed beings and being like, okay, I was taught this thing once, so this thing is always true forever and ever. It's like that's how we get stuck in our evolution. I'm often saying, I've said this a few podcast episodes, and I see this for myself, and I did some plant medicine a while back, and I've got this, was like, I am at the forefront of the evolution of my lineage. I am at the front of it. And it is my job to evolve my lineage forward in whatever way is available to me. But if I don't do that, then it doesn't move forward. I may, have offspring and so forth, but we are stuck in a certain way, and it's like our parents before us and our parents' parents, they didn't have the sort of information available so easily as we do now,
Exactly. 100%.
Like, we can get diet, mind, everything.
100%. And as you touched on there, like, you can, if the ideas are like staying the same and they're not evolving, it doesn't really matter if we grow, if we put more years onto our life and have offspring. If the ideas and the structure and the kind of beliefs are remaining the same and not open to being changed or shifted or grown or developed, you're kind of almost, as you said, you're keeping your lineage in that same kind of place. So it's good. I think it's really good to kind of, yes, there's been certain pieces of information that we've been delivered by our parents and who they had delivered by their parents. But we're in an age of information where we can literally research anything with these supercomputers in our pockets, and look at all sides. I think it's not good to just focus on one side. Look at all sides. Look at both sides of the coin, whether it comes down to diet, whether it comes down to how you should train, and then just come to some kind of conclusion for yourself as to what you think is going to work best for you. Trial and error. Try different things. People say, oh, I'm not sure if I should go onto a plant-based diet. I'm thinking about doing it. And I'm like, try it. If it doesn't work for you, see what does work. It might be that you might need to go 90% plants and have a bit of wild caught salmon. It might be that you need to maybe have an egg or two in the morning, but you want to add some more fermented foods in there. Like this, we've got so much capacity to make change for ourselves and explore different ideas. And as well with social media, like, one of the best things about it is, because of course we know that social media has its downsides, but just the exchange of information and being able to provide a platform for others to learn from and inspire. And I think that's what I really, really enjoy doing. Like, receiving messages from people who say, oh, you've really helped me, eat more plant foods. Or you're like, someone sent me a message yesterday, which was really funny. They said, you're like my wellness dictionary. I wish I could carry you around in my pocket. And I was just like, you know what? That's actually really interesting, So yeah, it's just stuff like that just makes me feel like what I'm doing is worthwhile,
Really feel that, like the purpose and meaning there.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get on to the topic of protein, because this is I feel sometimes like there's a conspiracy, right? Like, let's not call it conspiracy, because when we call things conspiracy, it starts meaning that I need to wear a tinfoil hat and hide under. Yeah. So there is a media machine that, for the most part, in my opinion, is against certain ideas. One of those ideas, I believe, also is plant-based, right? Because I imagine that plenty of these media companies, that their shareholders probably are also large shareholders in agriculture in some way, but mainly probably the production of cows, pigs, and so forth across the world. So it's not in their interest for people to take on this plant-based diet, because they'll make far less money, right? So one of the ways in which this idea is perpetuated is through the idea that you can't get enough protein through a plant-based diet. Now, I know this not to be true just because I've met a few plant-based bodybuilders in my life who are like, they don't do shakes, they just eat food. How does one go about getting a good amount of protein? And I'll give you an example here. So say you're going to have steak, right? 100 grams of steak is like 25 grams of protein. Yeah. How would we go about getting the equivalent in our evening meal, for instance, in a plant-based diet?
So again, you've got to remember there's protein in everything. Like there's literally protein in everything. So, but of course you'd want to make like a designated piece of plant-based protein, the kind of star of your plate. And whether that's lentils or tempeh, or those are probably the two that I eat the most. Tofu I eat occasionally, but I prefer tempeh as a fermented organic soy product. It's fermented.
What's tempeh?
So tempeh is basically fermented soybeans that have kind of been put together in almost like a block. It's almost like your ideal meat replacement. And again, it's a bland food, so you pretty much can do anything with it. Season it, you can marinate it, leave it for like 20, 25 minutes, pan fry it, you can bake it, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. And it's got quite like a nutty, chewy texture. So I would say if you wanted to move steak off your plate, you're going to lose 25, 30 grams of protein. You could put 150 to 200 grams of tempeh, and that will give you, if you had 200 grams of tempeh, that will give you over 40 grams of protein. And a lot of people are worried about carbohydrates, even though they shouldn't be worried about carbohydrates. And you probably get maybe 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrates. So you're dealing with a very like high protein, low carbohydrate food there. It's fermented, so you've got probiotics, which are good for your gut bacteria. Of course, it's organic as well, which is important when it comes down to soy products. So for me, tempeh is like, it's the ideal like plant protein really. But then again, you could go to like lentils. In a cup of lentils, you've got around about 20 grams of protein. And if you wanted to maybe create like some kind of bowl, you could have some lentils, maybe a bit of quinoa, which I think it's got 8 or 9 grams of protein per cup. Add some broccoli in there, a bit of maybe nutritional yeast, which is like yeast flakes, which have like quite like a cheesy, nutty flavor to them. Then add some avocado. That's easily a meal that's got 35 to 40 grams of protein. And then I also think that we like massively overshoot what we think our protein requirements should be.
Yes.
So the obsession with like trying to get as much as possible, like, 250 grams of protein per day. It's like, you don't really need that. Like there's been studies that I've looked at where 1.6 grams per kilogram, is it 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is the amount that you should really be shooting towards when it comes to protein if you train. So 1.6 is the lower end and 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight is the upper end. But there's been studies that have shown there's no difference in terms of building lean muscle if you have 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight compared to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So I weigh 90 kg. So 1.6, that would probably put me at around 140 to 150 grams of protein a day. And I hit that for the most part. And it's quite easy for me to do that. So if we look in the morning, I might have like an oatmeal bowl and I'll put some plant protein in there. I'll add some hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, all protein rich. Even oats have even got a bit of protein in them, like 9 or 10 grams per cup. Or I'll have a smoothie, same ingredients, use a bit of frozen fruit. And then for lunch, I will have like a protein pasta. So I don't know if you've heard about, like, you can get edamame pastas, organic soybean pasta, lentil pasta, chickpea pasta. So like your normal typical pasta, but just made from chickpea flour or lentil flour, which puts the protein up again. So easily can get like 30, 40 grams of protein. And if I even make like a bolognese sauce with green lentils in it and add that to it, you've got 40, 50 grams of protein easily. I even did a video about this on my Instagram. Like I did a kind of whole day of eating how I would when I train. And then for snacks, I would maybe have like a protein bite. So I actually make these. So I make them from oats, protein powder, hemp seeds, flax seeds, maca powder, put some like coconut milk in there and just make like little balls. And then you can just keep them in the fridge. And they're like 7 to 8 grams of protein per bite. So it really is like, as long as you know what you're doing, and you have, again, of course, I didn't have anywhere near this level of information or knowledge when I first started or even before I went. But once you really understand how easy it is, it does tend to make a mockery of the whole plant-based, protein deficient thing, which, is a non-factor really.
And like you said, there's a bit of an obsession around protein. Like for probably 12 years of my life, I was, in the gym 3-4 times a week. As you said, lifting big, heavy weights, especially the first 7 or 8, like just lifting heavy weights, until one day I just looked in the mirror and was like, I don't need to get any bigger than this. This is ridiculous. Yeah. But in those circles, there is this obsession with I guess it's a very masculine problem, isn't it? Bigger is better is one of the things, but also the more protein, the better as well, is the idea. And it's actually...
The idea is like, if some is good, more is better. So it's like everyone just wants more. How can I get more protein? How can I get more calories? Eating 10 eggs a day and all this kind of stuff. And it's just unnecessary. Like, it's just not really necessary, because I used to eat probably more protein than back then when I ate meat than I do now. And I actually saw I was able to put on more lean muscle. I think when I switched to vegan, I was 83 or 84 kilograms. Now I'm around hover around 89, 90. I've been able to put on lean muscle mass with no problems. And again, it's just a case of really just understanding that this is not an issue. Protein is abundant, and it doesn't actually matter whether you get it from plants or whether you get it from animals. The only thing with the plant side of protein is that you do have to be a bit more aware of the fact that you have to get it from different sources. So for your amino acid profile. So as a meat eater, I could eat chicken breast 3 times a day. I've got a full amino acid profile, easy. But with plants, you can't just eat black beans all day, because all plant foods have a slight deficiency in one or more amino acids, essential amino acid, that is. So that's why I tend to have a wide range of plant-based proteins across the day. So tempeh, lentils, oats, hemp seeds, plant-based protein powder, different beans. I'll just really diversify it throughout the day. And what you're getting is, as I said, a very diverse plant-based protein profile, which is going to give you loads of different minerals, phytonutrients, and most importantly, fiber as well. We always talk about where's your protein, but I think many of us don't get anywhere near as much fiber as we should, and fiber is very, very important for health.
Yeah, that's something I realized when in those gym days when I was, stopped eating carbs. There's plenty of times where I just stopped eating carbs and just meat, some broccoli and so forth. And a lot of people end up constipated in some way, right? Because there's not enough fiber in their diet. And I started to realize something I learned was actually that I functioned a lot better when I was having quite a high fiber diet. Actually, food was able to, so just want of a better phrase, move through me quite easily.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of the things that I've wrote a blog post about this on my website. Like, one of the things is just your digestive system just becomes so optimal, because you're getting so much fiber, so much different types of fiber to be able to populate your gut bacteria, which are going to work towards strengthening your immune system and optimizing your digestion. So you're just going to go, but not at a rate which is alarming. Certain people maybe go to the bathroom and empty their bowels a few times a week, 3 or 4 times a week. I would go 2 or 3 times a day. And I just feel that leaves me lighter. It just leaves me with more energy, and I'm not carrying all this heavy food on me. Of course, everyone's different, but this is the kind of experience that I've had. And by the sounds of it, you've found something similar as well with the more high fiber.
Yeah. There was a part where, growing up on rice, just eat rice all the time. It's just, me and my older sister, we joke with my mum sometimes. It's like, all we did was having rice twice a day for 7 days a week, right? That's just how it was. And I went through a phase where I just replaced all my rice with quinoa. Stopped eating rice, just had quinoa. No rice just have quinoa, and then started to branch out to some of the other pulses as well, like lentils and stuff. And found exactly that. It's just like, oh wow, I feel lighter, especially in the evening. I was finding in the evening, I wasn't having that I've had loads of food, I feel really tired. I can't really do anything. But I was feeling a lot more of an ease and lightness. And it was just food was just moving through me so much better. It's just the ease as well. Because I spoke to a lot of guys who gym a lot, and they're like, oh man, I'm just constipated all the time, or I'm only going to the bathroom like you said 3 times a week. And I'd be like, wow, that doesn't feel like enough. I feel once or twice a day is what we should all be doing.
Minimum once a day, minimum. Like that's the bare minimum. And for me, if I go twice a day, I know I'm good. Sometimes 3, but at the very, very bare minimum, we should be clearing our bowels once a day. And when I'm, when you're focused on, getting all of the steaks in and getting the whey protein, like your digestion is just going to be impacted. It's just something that, which is interesting actually, because there are a lot more people who do lift and who do train who maybe aren't vegan, but who are moving towards plant-based protein shakes. So like organic pea protein, organic hemp protein, because whey is just not great for digestion at all. So that's something that I've noticed as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And it's probably this, I mean, people are moving a lot more of their diet to plant-based, but just not shouting about it necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, whether that's through fear of maybe being judged or whatever. But I've found that, and it's quite interesting because, as I said, I'm someone who's naturally been quite introverted, but I just feel like I have this conviction to want to be able to inspire as many people as I possibly can. And it's funny because I hated social media as well. I mean, there's still very many aspects about it that I don't like, but I was never a social media person. Like even when my wife says this, like she says this stuff where just before we met, or just as we met, when you meet someone, you might do like a little stalk of their social media or whatever. You couldn't find anything on me because I had no social footprint at all. I maybe had like a Facebook account, which was just dormant, not being used. But so then I think, coming across with this information, and I just wanted to share it and give people that value and give people information that I felt could kind of benefit their lives. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Amazing. I want to shift a bit here into the kind of culture of food. My travel experience has been interesting. Is that I spent like 5 months in India at one point, and being plant-based in India is very easy, right?
Yeah.
Because religiously, most of their religions is part of it's built in. It's built into it.
It's essentially vegetarian, mostly vegetarian.
Yeah. And then you've got the Jains there who they don't eat any animal products. They won't have garlic or onions either because they don't believe in killing anything, because if it's a root vegetable and you kill the plant by doing that. And then you kind of hop over and you move over to Southeast Asia, and again there's a lot more available in terms of a plant-based diet. And these countries also Ethiopia as well was another place where I visited, and wonderful plant-based food.
It's over there.
Very strong. Yeah. But one of the things I also see, which is quite prevalent across these countries, is spicing and taste, right? It's a big thing there. All those countries, you think their cuisine is very unique. You can taste it in your mouth when you think about it, right? And I'm going to compare it to South America, where I spent some time in South America as well. And for it's not the most plant-based diet at all, but also the food can often be quite bland as well. Sorry, any South Americans, I apologize. I know in Brazil the food can be quite good in Brazil, but when we're talking, Argentina, it's very just meat and some stuff on the side. Chile, and as I was saying, Peru, similar, Colombia and so forth. So it's almost quite cultural, how we eat.
Yeah.
So it must be quite difficult for people who come from a culture that's not kind of leaning towards plant-based to get into it, because their identity is also tied to that as well.
100%, absolutely. And I think it was a bit of a surprise when I mentioned it to my mum initially when I first switched, because of course, like my mum was growing up in the house, always eating the chicken and jollof rice and fufu, all of these cow meats, sheep meats, all of this stuff, which I all ate, and it was all great. So I guess me telling her that that's what I was doing was just like the biggest shock to her system. So I can understand, because we've been culturally ingrained to believe that I'm an African, or I'm from the Caribbean, it's curry goat, like it's all of this stuff that I'm supposed to eat. Do you know what I mean? But it's interesting with that, like particularly with Africa's actually got a history of being quite plant predominant.
Yes.
But it was only when kind of colonialism took hold, and then all of these farming practices came in, that the meat consumption just went out, sky high. And of course, meat consumption in Africa was also seen as a sign of wealth. And it was only something that was eaten every now and again. So, we eat way too much meat compared to what our ancestors and actually, growing up in Africa actually ate. So there's that kind of, shift in what needs to be looked at in terms of where things were and kind of where we're at now. So I understand it. Like we kind of wrap our culture in what we eat, and it is a huge part. Let's not make any mistake about that. But that doesn't mean that you can, that doesn't mean you always have to continue to eat meat. You can still get the same flavors. You can still eat a lot of the same foods, and you can just add certain things in and still have that culture. Not giving up meat doesn't mean giving up your culture, in my opinion. You can do it in a way which kind of ties it in and really brings it to life. So
it's funny because my mum has that you say that you can still eat the same foods and the same tastes. As my mum now knows that I'm not really eating meat. Instead of when she cooks curry goat, cooks curry goat for everybody, and then she'll make a small pan for me, which is like chickpeas usually. It's like all it's all vegetables in there.
Yeah.
And what's started to happen over the family dinners is that pot has had to get bigger because everybody wants some of this at least.
Yeah.
It's started to have a bit more of the chickpeas and stuff, and the curry goat's still there.
Yeah,
but there's also the call to have more of the
and you know what? That's what matters. It's not about everyone shifting right away. I need to go and get the plant-based foods. But you set the example. You started doing something a little different, which I'm sure from the very outset they were like, "No, this is weird. What does that mean?" But over time, as you keep doing it, you keep getting it into their mind frame. They start to think, "Oh, let me have a try." And once they realize how nice it is, then they're like, "Actually, I want a bit more of that. Maybe this isn't as weird as I thought it was. Maybe this isn't aligned with the crazy vegan who was screaming at someone on YouTube. This is actually very tasty, nutritious food, and I feel energetic. I feel light after eating it. Yeah, I'll have a bit of that." And then that's how it kind of snowballs for the majority of people. They snowball into it as opposed to someone going, "You need to go vegan," and then they switch overnight, which basically never happens anyway.
Yeah, it does. So true. So true. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking actually is around plant-based like processed foods.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw you mention this, and it's something that's been interesting to me because it's very easy with some plant-based foods to be like something like seitan, tofu, and I think you mentioned tempura. It's like they almost look quite processed as foods. And it was interesting actually that they have quite a history already to them. So they're not processed. But then we have things like the Beyond Meat burger, for instance, and some of the other plant-based stuff that's appearing, like even, the thing that pops into my head, because I've had a few of these, is the Greg's vegan sausage roll.
Yeah.
Your whole tone of voice changed when I said those words.
You know what? I think like these, I've actually had that vegan sausage roll and it actually tastes all right, but I just don't. I always say like if it's going to be harder and harder in years to come for people to be a healthy vegan because of a lot of the foods out there now that are they're just being pushed to people. They're just being aggressively marketed to people as plant-based, with these plant-based burgers and whatnot. And it's not to say that they're bad per se, but I think if you're doing it from a health perspective, if you want to be vibrant, you want to have vitality, I always just say, have these foods once in a while and just limit them. They shouldn't form the foundation of any healthy plant-based diet. They do have a place within a healthy lifestyle if you want to just have it every now and again. There's no problem with that. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more of these, and it is up to people to be aware of that and to have that, to be cognizant of it. And I think because we live in such a convenience culture, companies are going to make convenience food, and that tends to be the food that's processed. And it doesn't matter whether it's plant-based or not. It's still not the best food in terms of if something that you're going to eat regularly to kind of, give you that vitality that you need. So have it every now and again as like a little treat or whatever, if that's what you want to do. But cooking is where it really is at. Getting to grips with, fresh ingredients from scratch, cooking meals. And you know what? It just there's something about that, which is what kind of tied me into it and really kind of hooked me into cooking, creating something from scratch. And whether that's following a recipe or kind of getting recipes and then kind of formulating your own and getting your own style of food going, it's very rewarding. So I always want people to kind of move towards that.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, because it's so easy. Because even, sometimes you're in a rush, and I found myself doing it, those those little corn sausage things, they just get me when I walk through metros. I'm like, man, there's certain, when you're just like, I'm hopping between like meetings or coaching calls, it's just like those and some hummus. Like listeners, honestly, when you have a little naughty treat, those corn sausages and some hummus, it's like magic, right? But it's because we're in a room rushing around and moving around, so we feel like cooking is, a lengthy process. It takes time. So I guess the question is how do we, is cooking as lengthy process as we think it is when it comes to plant-based food?
No, it's not as lengthy, but you just have to do it more often. I'd say you just have to get used to doing it more often. And whether it's plant-based, or whether it's plant-focused, or you're just eating healthy anyway, you tend to actually have to cook. Like you just have to, like you can't be doing Deliveroo and all that kind of stuff and expecting to be, especially if like, a better kind of stage of health is your goal. I think just cooking from scratch is what you really need to do. And it's not as lengthy a process. There's plenty of meals that you can make in 20, 25 minutes, super easy meals that you can do as meal prep. So one of the things before the whole pandemic stuff happened, like, and going into work, like one of the things that I'd do would be to cook like in bulk on a Saturday or a Sunday. Just cook like a bulk quinoa, broccoli, tempeh, or lentils or something like that, and then just have that there. So I've got lunch when I take to work Monday to like maybe Thursday, and then on Friday I might like try and buy it as healthy a lunch as I possibly can. But there's easy ways around it. Like meal prep is something that's really easy to do if you're, pressed for time or you're busy. We all lead busy lives. I don't say I cook all the time, but I always tend to try and have something that's there that I can kind of call on if I need to. And if I want to order maybe once a week as something relatively healthy, then I'll do that. But I know I've put the habits in place at a foundational level to make sure that I don't have to do that as often as I would, as often as maybe other people may. As I said, it's just a case of really stripping it back and just starting to cook and really getting used to that process.
I guess the thing that keeps coming to me, Jeffrey, is like, when's Jeffrey going to run his cooking course? Like, when he takes people through, no, hear me out. What you're going to do is, it's like an 8-week course. Yeah. Every week you cook a new meal.
Yeah.
A couple of new meals. You do it on Zoom, 2 hours. Everyone knows what ingredients need to order every week. They get the list. Yeah. And they cook with Jeffrey.
Do you know what? I'll give that some thought, because that was something that someone's mentioned that to me in the past. I think the food side of things, I really do enjoy doing that. Whether or not it's down that road, of course, who knows, it remains to be seen, but I'll definitely bear that idea in mind for sure.
Because I think cooking is the thing that frightens a lot of people, right? Because they just don't have that, I can think back to years ago. I never get going to university, and this was a long time ago now, right? And I went to university and I was cooking, and I was like making some rice and I was making some chicken, and a couple of the guys stood in the doorway just watching me for about half an hour, and they were like, how are you doing this? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, how, you're putting seasoning on the chicken, you're putting it in the oven, you know how long to put it in there, you're cooking the rice, you're doing this, how do you know how to do this? I was like, well, I just watched my mum do this my whole life, so I've absorbed this. And then even like late into my 20s, like, rusting up quick stir fries and stuff for friends when they pop around, then being like, how did you even know to put these things together?
Yeah.
People are quite scared of the cooking process. Partly I think some of it's getting it wrong. We've all had that experience where you've cooked a meal, you've experimented, you cooked a meal, and then you start eating it, you're like, oh my God, this tastes horrible.
Yeah. That's true. That is very true. There is that fear, but I think it's just about getting over that first step, and whether that's through some kind of cooking course or releasing a physical recipe book, or doing some kind of interactive thing. It's definitely something that I'm going to think about, because I think one thing that I've noticed within the community with all the information that I put out is the food and the recipes and the kind of the display of the food, which gets the most most response. So yeah.
People are scared to cook and get it wrong, and exactly. When you have when you learn to say cook 4 or 5 dishes, and those dishes may have not exactly the same food, but some things that can be shared across, and you learn how to like cook a vegetable, season it, and things like that, then you can then start creating your own dishes from that.
Yeah, exactly that.
Wow. Yeah, that just seemed really obvious thing, actually. Cook along. People love a little cook.
Yeah. I'll think about that for sure.
It was like the banana bread thing at the beginning of lockdown.
Oh yeah, everyone was doing it. I got onto that. I made a really nice buckwheat banana bread, actually. I'm gonna try and maybe make it. It was good.
Oh, really nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you really, like, I'm sitting here and I feel like, I'm like, man, you know, if I just spent a bit of time, I've got a few recipe books here I could study. I should really go vegan. I should really. I feel you've evangelized so well here. I am convinced.
Yeah, I definitely try not to kind of push it onto anyone. I don't feel like the way that I live is better than anyone else. I'm not gonna think that because someone's eating animal product, like especially in Twitter, you see it a lot, the different silos. But I adopt a stance where I like to speak to loads of different people. I connect with people who eat, you know, mostly meat, but I've learned things about health, maybe like supplementation and different things. So I think you can learn things from everyone, you know, regardless of what kind of position they adopt. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of cast your net wide and be as open and as non-confrontational as possible when it comes to sharing information.
Staying open. Yeah, so true. If there was any, like, you know, tidbits, 1, 2, 3 things that you really wish people would go out and do in terms of moving towards a plant-based diet, what would those things be?
I'd say don't chase perfection, because a lot of there's this kind of belief that if you're moving towards a plant-based lifestyle or a healthier lifestyle in general, that you need to get everything right straight away. That's really counterproductive. Just adopt a position of, right, I want to go plant-based. Let me just see what I can do for this week. You know, get some more plant-based foods into your diet, maybe reduce a few of the processed foods, and then, you know, maybe pick up a couple of recipes next week, and then just continue to move forward with slow incremental habits that will snowball over time and put you in a position where you've got something that's actually sustainable. I would say maybe find out the reason why you're doing it. What is your reason for doing it? You know, you don't want to just do it because you saw your favorite celebrity doing it, or you saw, you know, a show on TV that persuaded you to do it. Do you want to do it to improve your health? Do you want to do it because you have an affinity for animals and you found out about certain things that they go through or whatever? Or do you want to have an impact from an environmental perspective? And if you root yourself in any one of those things, or even all 3 or 2 or however many you want to, when it starts to get, there might be a period of time where you think, oh, I can't be bothered to do this. That reasoning and that kind of what you've rooted yourself in terms of why you want to do it will keep you there. So that's something that I would say is very, very impactful as well. And thirdly, just get used to the process of cooking. Like move away from see it as a lifestyle. Basically, it is a lifestyle. And I think a lot of people, when they shift towards new ways of eating or healthy habits or whatever, they kind of shift into that diet mindset. And I think a diet mindset is very restrictive, and you feel like you can't do anything, or you can't go anywhere, or you can't eat this, or you can't eat that. But if you see it as a lifestyle, and it's a big lifestyle change, I'll tell people that for sure. Like, it's a huge change, but it's an attainable one with small incremental habits, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it just has to be enough where you're feeling like you're making better decisions for your health, and you're inspiring other people around you, and you can just move forward in that regard. So yeah, that's what I would say. See it as a lifestyle and embrace it, and not feel like you have to kind of give up anything, so to speak.
Keep that the deeper meaning behind it.
Really, yeah, exactly.
You know, like so many things in life that can get hard when we ground ourselves in a deeper meaning. You know, whether it's faith, whether it is spirituality, even that really holds us in the time of difficulty.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe not relying on motivation as well, because motivation will always go up and down. Discipline and being rooted in that faith, that's what's going to keep you going. Because, for example, with like training as a tidbit, there's not every day that I wake up in the morning that I really want to train, but I get up and do it anyway, because I know that's more discipline, and that's more like being rooted in, why am I training? I'm training because I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to make sure that my bone density is strong. I want to make sure I've got good muscle mass, make sure that, you know, got optimal levels of sex hormones, all these kind of things. And that's the reason. Like, once you get the reasoning why, it makes it very easy to do things that maybe in that specific moment you might not want to do.
Maybe I'll get you back another time to talk about the sex hormones, because I imagine the men will be very interested in that part.
Yes, they will. I actually just got my blood tested, which is very interesting, and my testosterone was high. So, you know, people talk about, oh, you got to eat meat for your testosterone and that kind of stuff. But I've got the proof there that doesn't need to happen. So we can talk about that another time.
yeah, definitely, because testosterone is also another obsession of men. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, Jeffrey. Thank you for your time, man. I feel inspired. I feel really inspired. I'm going to pick up my Deliciously Ella cookbook and have a bit of a study in myself. And I'm going to head over to your website because I know there's probably plenty of recipes there to pick up as well.
Yeah, man, recipes there. There's recipes on my Instagram page. I've got my recipe ebook, Eat More Plants, which is there as well. So that's 7 recipes plus a bonus recipe. That was my first ebook that I released in February. And yeah, man, watch this space. I'm definitely going to be looking to do a lot more with regards to whether it's recipes or some other projects that I'm working on. Just my sole aim really, as I said, is to continue to inspire people, to push people in towards a mindset of thinking about how they can benefit their life eating more plants, or just living a healthy lifestyle in general, being conscious of what they're putting into their body. So that's what it's all about.
And where can people find you as the best place to contact Jeffrey?
Yeah, so my Instagram is just Jeffrey Boadi. That's JEFFREYBOADI. I have a Twitter account as well, and it's the same handle, but just with an underscore at the end of it for the Twitter. My website is the www.thewealthofhealth.co.uk, and that's where I kind of put more longer form blog posts, and I put a few recipes on there. I send out emails, sort of bi-weekly emails or every 3 weeks. Just with more information about health in that more kind of longer form format. So yeah, those are the 3 best places to find me.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to head over there straight after this. I've got some time between my next call. So I'll definitely be checking out because, it's, health is so important to our. 100%. If you don't have health, you don't have anything.
You don't have anything. You literally have nothing. And I think that's something that we forget, in this capitalistic society. We're chasing the next thing. We're chasing more money. We're chasing, and, it's not bad to want to have more money or nice things or whatever, but when it's at the expense of your life force, that's when you really need to kind of step back, reconsider, and kind of figure out what's important, So yeah, and I think if you have health and if you have vitality, you're actually going to be able to achieve a lot more. So I think it's about flipping on its head, prioritizing your health and wellness, and watching things actually progress from there.
Yeah, life force. That's the very if you don't have vitality and life force, looking after those.
So important.
Wow, thank you, Jeffrey, for your time. Thank you for this evening. It's been wonderful and inspiring talking to you. It really has been. I imagine the listeners have felt the same. If you have, learned anything, or you feel inspired to go towards more of a plant-based diet, please reach out to myself or Jeffrey and just, tell us what changes you're making or what you took from the episode.
Yeah, brilliant. As I always say, I'm always communicating with the community. DMs are always open if people want to ask questions, all that kind of stuff. I love just kind of communicating with people. So yeah, and it's, as I said, it's such a passion of mine that I really enjoy and thoroughly like speaking to people about it and helping people make a positive shift for their health. So yeah.
Definitely feel that.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, listeners, and we'll see you next week.
Brilliant. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.